Well, they had a lot of pine needles in them,
Pine needles,
so I didn't know if I could use
Right. Yeah. So no, try to find out if one of your neighbors, probably your neighbors, collect leaves and put them by the curb, right? So you just go around your neighbor and you ask them, can I have
coffee
those?
is considered brown, isn't it?
What's that?
Coffee is considered brown.
Yeah, coffee is considered. Yeah.
If
And
he
that
doesn't
coffee-
answer your question, it's because he's quite deaf.
Oh,
So you have to
okay.
ask him
Step
again.
right up here.
and
What about shredded newspaper?
shredded newspaper is good. Yeah. I started putting like when I make tea or make tea for Shelley, it comes now in all these little paper wraps, right? Well, you can throw that in the garbage, or you can just rip it up in 4 or 5 pieces and throw it in your compost. And it's actually good for compost to have some paper in it, because a lot of good papers, they have things like clay in it and stuff like that. So you get some other things that are added to it, like other nutrients. So it's actually a good thing to do. Like with things like coffee grinds and things like that, all the filters and stuff like that, you don't, like 2 weeks later, you don't see them anymore. They all fall apart really fast. So that's a good way to do it. So oxygen, yeah, regularly flip it over, because a lot of the bacteria that are in there working, they need oxygen. If you have lots of worms in there, they'll help. The other thing that will help, if you have sticks in there. People say, well, I don't like sticks in my compost. I like sticks in my compost. They're a pain when you want to sieve it and add it to your garden, or add it to the top of your garden. I mean, if you dig it in, like I dig my compost in, I don't put it on the top. How I do it like my dad used to do it, and that's why I wear wooden shoes. I dig a little furrow, and then I put the soil that I take out of that, I put that on the end of the garden, and then I just fill that with compost, and I flip the soil in. I put compost in, I put the next row, and over, and just like, almost like hand plowing. But you don't wreck the soil so much, like if you really plow with a mechanical plow. So it's better for the soil structure. Organic matter. So yeah, green stuff, brown stuff, white stuff. I actually put sawdust in my compost too sometimes. Like if it really gets soggy and wet, I just go down to the basement and go to my workshop, and I get a little box full of sawdust and just mix that in with it. And what it does, it soaks up some of the moisture, but it also gives more body to the compost, right? So you have more volume. I don't think it says in here, but one of these fact sheets, I think it's the compostbc.ca one about hot composting. The minimum size for a compost bin to get hot compost is about 4 by 4, and then it has to be at least 3 feet high. So this is about the right size, and it doesn't even have to be that high. Mine are not this high; they're probably about that size, but not as high. And so if you want to have hot compost, they need to be that size. If they're smaller, there's not enough volume to generate the heat. Urine is actually really good for your compost. So if you don't mind to walk out to your compost bin at night and pee in it, go right ahead. You add it to your compost, and it'll be very good. Nitrogen, right? And it's clean. Urine is clean, so there's nothing.
Public washroom.
What's that?
Public washroom. That's why the rhubarb grew so well right behind the farmer's back door.
Yeah. So okay, I was when I was talking about organic matter and adding sticks and stuff like that. When you clip the hedge and you have just green stuff, it doesn't really matter how small you make it, although it breaks up easier if it's smaller. But when you put sticks in, like wooden sticks, you have to sort of make sure that they're not much bigger than that, because otherwise it's really hard. It's hard when you turn over your compost and things like that. But the nice thing about sticks this size is they aerate your compost because every time you flip it over, these things, they hold up cavities and stuff like that, right? So it stays aerated longer. So that's a good thing to do.
What about vacuum bags? I heard that was good.
I put all mine.
Yeah.
We have a cat, so a lot of cat hair, a lot of trace elements, a lot of trace minerals in here. When I do haircuts, it always goes in there. And most of what you pick up in your vacuum cleaner is your own skin cells. So you might as well compost them.
Now, at one time I was thinking, you know,
Take the
like
money
go
out.
because a friend of ours is a hairdresser, and she just lives like a couple of blocks away. And I've actually thought about going to her salon and ask her for all the hair clippings.
And the birds love it. when
And
they're building nests in the spring.
yeah, it's good because they add micronutrients to the soil, so it's all good. Yeah, anything organic almost, except when it comes from like things that some people ask about pet feces and stuff like that, and that's not a good idea. It's okay if you just use it for decorative gardens, but not for a vegetable garden, right? Because you don't get your compost hot enough, so it doesn't kill.
Well, that's why you don't
I've had some apparent success keeping raccoons and deer away from fruit trees by ringing the area around the fruit tree with human hair.
Yeah, or peeing around. One of my colleagues, he lives out Charles Settlement, and the deer always eat his garden, and there's only very few things he can grow, and that's what he does. Him and his boys, they pee around the garden, and it keeps a lot of wildlife away. So obviously helps, I guess. Okay, so the fourth pillar is bacteria and worms. Now we pass this one around, right, and it is just like nice crumbly stuff, and I'll see if I can just put this over here. Maybe. But our worms look like this. And there's tons of them. Like this spring we were doing let's see, there's just like tons and tons. There's probably more than a few thousand worms in our compost. And this spring, here, did you get that on the camera? This spring, Shai and I were at Fred Kids, and we were doing a composting party in the green corner, and a teacher came by, and her and her kids, they were so fascinated with our worms, and she said, "I'm doing something wrong with my compost because I don't have worms." And I said, "Well," I said, "you can have the ones that we have with us, or," I said, "you can come by the house later and you can just come," because I was just digging compost in the garden, and what I do, if I don't sieve my compost before I apply it, I try to pick out like the clumps of worms and put them back in the compost instead of digging them in the garden. They don't want, you can never have probably too many worms in the garden, but they're doing more good work in the compost, so I put them back in the compost. So she came by, and I was just, with my pitchfork, I would lift up part of the compost, and I could just grab handfuls of worms, and like in no time I had one full like this, and that's probably a couple thousand worms. Yeah, probably.
Now, did you introduce that type of worm to the compost, or you
No,
just made the
they
compost
come.
when they came?
They come to your compost because they're attracted by the bacteria and the nutrients. But if it gets too wet, they'll disappear. If it gets too dry, they disappear.
If it gets too hot,
If it gets too hot,
you
they
open
all
the
go
lid,
to the side.
You open the lid, and they're all clinging to the top of the lid, and they're all trying to vacate through the side if it gets too hot.
And the other thing is, sometimes if you find you have a harder time attracting worms to your compost, go to Neil's farm or somebody that has some chickens or whatever, and add some manure to your, like fresh manure to your compost, and that usually attracts like worms, especially the small red ones. Like there's
Those are native.
these are just like a whole.
So
these are all
they
native
are
worms,
native.
but
They're
there's
native red
probably
wigglers, yeah.
there's
Okay.
probably 12 different species of worms in there,
Yeah.
you know, in the compost as a whole. I forget how many species we have in New Brunswick, but there's like tons of those. But does anybody here have like a vermicomposter, like inside one? Ever used one?
No.
Yeah, we have friends, and we babysat their worms every once in a while, and they are really like, they're thin, and
They're almost transparent.
they eat their weight. They eat their weight in waste every day. So they produce a lot of stuff. Even if you look at the bottom of this, I just put this in here at 4:30. Look at it, like, you can always see there's worm excrement all over the sides and the bottom of that container, because I don't know if they work harder when they're stressed or what, but they are working all the time, and so they generate a lot of good soil. And the place where we have been now, and it's on your sheet, and if you want to come and look at our garden, we have the compost facility, and then we have a little greenhouse and stuff like that. But the garden soil, when we first came there, it was just sand, and we've been We've been there since 1989, so every year there's about a cubic meter of compost going into the garden, and the soil is like black now.